Anyway, God bless you. Thank you very much for coming. This Sunday, we're continuing our Paschal series of sermons on what it means to have faith from a biblical, patristic, Orthodox sense. We have considered how faith is more than simply giving mental assent to an idea, but faith is something that needs to be fully embodied. Faith is best understood as faithfulness, understood as loyalty or allegiance, fidelity. Father George, who's with us today, gave us the excellent definition a few weeks ago of faithfulness: unfailingly remaining loyal to someone or something and putting that loyalty into consistent practice regardless of extenuating circumstances. So last week we saw in the gospel how the fidelity of Christ to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which included the Samaritans, called them back to him through the notoriously unfaithful person of the woman at the well, who then drew forth her entire city, representing the notoriously unfaithful people of Samaria. All of them transformed by their encounter with Jesus, so that they might become at last themselves unfailingly loyal to the heavenly bridegroom, to the God of Israel. Today we will see how the second part of faithfulness of that definition plays out, to remain so in the face of extenuating circumstances. And by extenuating, it's kind of a fancy and nice word for difficult, rough, unpleasant situations. So the story today comes to us in John chapter 9, the story of the man who was born blind. It represents one of the most extraordinary healings performed by Christ, probably only exceeded by that of raising the dead. Somebody who, according to the demographic tradition, literally did not have eyes. And so his healing was the restoration of the eyes themselves, putting them where they never been. And at the same time, it shows us the most ordinary and typical examples of human frailty and weakness, but with the caveat of revealing an example of wonderful courage and faithfulness. So one would think that such an extraordinary miracle would be evidence enough for the people who still doubted Jesus, that he came from on high, that he was the Messiah. But rather, this wonderful miracle, this wonderful experience, blessing among the people, is twisted and spun into further evidence against Jesus. Can't win. Why? Because it took place on the Sabbath. And what are you not supposed to do on the Sabbath? Work. Of course, it's not like Jesus, came in to work that day and clocked in and saw a bunch of patients and took their vitals and prescribed medications and then sent their bills to the insurance company. It wasn't work. He wasn't even charging. So it's not that kind of work that would be subject to the law of the Sabbath. However, Christ himself does say that it is work. He says, I must do the works of him who sent me. And elsewhere he says, the Father continues to work, and I am working. So the law of the Sabbath applies to earthly work, but it doesn't abrogate God's work. God continues to work even on the Sabbath day, and so Christ is doing God's work. Nevertheless, after this healing, there's a division among the people. Some people are like, hey, how can this guy not be a prophet? How can he not be at least blessed and holy? And others are saying, no, he broke the Sabbath. And they're fighting each other, right? Same old human situation. And so the man who cannot see for the first time in his life is accosted by the crowd. He's dragged to the Pharisees, who are suspicious of Jesus, and they want to know how this took place. Not because they're actually interested in believing in Jesus or finding out the truth, but because they're building a case against Jesus. Right? This is a show trial. So And part of that, in the kind of, if you've ever read the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn, and you hear the stories of all the kind of the show trials that took place, this has a very similar feel. And so they drag his parents into the assembly, say, what about, was this your son? Why does he see, et cetera, put them on the stand, and they're terrified. Because they've already been told that whoever confesses Jesus to be the Messiah will be cast out of the synagogue. They've already predetermined the outcome. So if you even hint that you're believing in that, you are in trouble. So they say, well, yeah, this is our son, but he's old enough to speak for himself. You ask him. So they basically throw their own son under the bus, if you want to use the modern way of describing it. They don't want to get entangled. Great, right? How many of you would love to see your parents do that? Right? And some of us, unfortunately, may very well have experienced such a thing from our family members. And so this is a really disappointing image, kind of an image of cowardice, if you will. But we have to be, take and understand what's at stake for these folks. To be cast out of the synagogue is to essentially be cast out of society in this time, in this culture. It's not like you could just go down the street and there's the second synagogue of free Jews or something like that. Or you can go down to the other synagogue on the other side of the counter or something like that. To be cast out of the synagogue was essentially kind of a social death sentence. They don't want to be caught up in that. And of course, I'm judging those parents harshly. There is some evidence, though, that maybe the relationship wasn't that good to begin with. It says that when they find the young man, he was a beggar. He was born blind, so he couldn't get work, so he was begging. I don't know about you, but if I had a disabled child, I would probably do everything in my power so that they wouldn't be out begging. So it's not a good image, right, of maybe what that relationship was with those parents. So perhaps he had not been supported by them for a long time. And in any case, it's clear that their action was essentially failing to show faithfulness, right? Unswerving fidelity to someone in face of an extenuating circumstance. And so they let him stand alone, come what may. Now, the man who was healed and who can now see, remember that when he was healed, he wasn't healed immediately. It wasn't like that. Jesus put the clay on the eyes and said, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. He didn't go with it. So when the man finally is fully healed at the pool of Siloam and sees, he has no idea who it is who healed him. I mean, he might know Jesus did this, right? He's obviously picked that up, but he hasn't met Jesus to see him to know who he is. So he can only speak the truth of what he knows. And he is nevertheless unflinching in telling the truth about what happened to him. He shows the beginning of real faithfulness, of being loyal even to the person and defending that person, even though he doesn't even know who he is. And so he's cast out. The synagogue would have been an important place for him, even because it was a place where you could get support. Okay, social services, if you will, in the community would have probably come through the synagogue. So now, luckily, of course, he could see, so he might be able to fend for himself better, but he was essentially cut off from whatever other forms of support besides his family that he once had. So receiving sight was the greatest gift he had ever been given. But like Spider-Man, with great gifts come great responsibility. He had to take care of himself now, and he was faced with a life of unknowns and unknown extenuating circumstances that he was about to fall into. The synagogue cast him out. His parents let him stand alone. Jesus finds him. When it says that Jesus found him, we should understand that that's not like an accidental thing. Oh, I bumped into you in the marketplace a couple days later. How you been? Good, I see your eyes are working. When it says Jesus found him, it suggests he was looking for him because he heard that he was cast out. He goes to find him actively and intentionally. And he talks to him and he says a strange thing. Do you believe in the Son of God? Now, it's an odd question, of course, again, if we think of belief only in terms of some kind of mental assent to an intellectual proposition, right? Why are you asking me what my thoughts are about the Son of God? That's not really helpful in the moment. No, it's pretty clear that Jesus is inviting him into a relationship of faithfulness to the person of the Son of God. That's what that word belief encompasses. Becoming faithful, becoming allied or loyal, or having allegiance to this Son of God, because it was the Son of God who healed him. The man does not even know that the man talking to him is, in fact, Jesus, the one who healed him. So he says, who is he that I may believe in him? Pistevso, that I may give my faith to him. And remember when we talked about what that means. To give your faith is not just simply to say, yeah, I think you're God. It's to say, I follow you. I pledge myself to you, that I may give my faith to you. So Jesus reveals that he is the one who is talking to him. And so his reaction, again, reveals that belief is more than simply mental assent, because what does he say? I believe. And he falls down and worships him, which is redundant, right? Because proskinesis means literally to fall down. To worship is to fall down before God. You fall down before your King and your Lord. You fall down before the one to whom you have pledged your fealty, your allegiance. So by entering into this relationship of faith, the man not only gives his allegiance to Jesus as the Son of God, the King of glory, but in return, he is entering into that covenant relationship. He is receiving back from God faithfulness and righteousness into his own life. Cast out of the synagogue on earth, he is now enrolled in the kingdom of heaven, while still on earth and living in his body. In the remaining verses which follow in chapter 9, which are not part of the reading today, but reveal a lot of this, we see the immediate aftermath of this event. Jesus says, for judgment I have come into the world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. Then some of the Pharisees who were with him heard these words and said to him, are we blind also? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you could have no sin. But now you say, we see. Therefore your sin remains. For judgment to come into the world means for God to put things right. To put things right in this context was that those who thought they could see, but were really just arrogant, controlling, judgmental, the Pharisees, were being revealed to be the blind ones. And the one who before knew nothing, was blind from birth, the image of us all, right? Spiritually blind from birth, all of us, is now the one who truly sees, because he's been illumined by the Holy Spirit. He knows who his Savior is. In this life, brothers and sisters, if we're going to be actual Christians, we're going to be practice Christians, whatever you want to call it, we are going to find our faithfulness to God tested repeatedly. There are people who will judge us, who will criticize us, simply for believing that God exists. Somebody says, do you believe in God? You say, yeah, I believe in God. Maybe they'll giggle at you, or they'll tease you. If you're in school, if you're at work, they can do it to your face. School, at least they still will. Because kids are fearless and cool. Adults are cowardly. That's the only difference. Don't be fooled. Don't feel bad if they tease you, because at least God can work with that because at least it's interesting to them. If they respond and go, yeah, whatever, or how nice for you, and they don't care, Lord have mercy on their soul. Because there's nothing for God to attach to them. They just don't care. And there will be people who react negatively to us just because of negative stereotypes that they have of Christians. And we as Christians need to own up to our part in giving life to those stereotypes, right? It's not all the caricatures that we might see on TV or in films. It's also us when we're hypocritical, when we're judgmental, when we fail to live up to our faithfulness. But I hope that each one of us will someday hear someone say to us, you're not like most Christians. You seem genuinely loving and joyful. What I hoped a Christian would be. And I hope that each one of us will be able to reply, I thank you, and I understand your experience, because I myself had been that, for example, too many times to count. But I'm also happy to tell you that most Christians that I know are what you feel me too. And I owe it to that. And then I hope that you might even have the courage to say, do you know about the Son of God? Would you like to believe? Would you like to come to my church? Have really good coffee. And maybe even to know them as King and as God, which we'll talk about next week. It was through their good example and nothing less that the humble Christians of the ancient world transformed nations, the Roman Empire, kingdoms upon the earth, starting 2,000 years ago. But it wasn't easy. They faced an extraordinary number of extenuating circumstances. They knew that remaining unfailingly loyal to Jesus Christ and putting that loyalty into consistent practice would put them at odds with the powers of the world, with the culture around them. Simply recognizing somebody as your king, who is not the king in the capital of whatever country you're in, puts you at odds with your own government, believe it or not, in many cases. Simply being faithful to one God whom you worship alone above all other gods, well, that put them at odds with the religions of all the people around them, very often members of their own families, their own villages, cities, and so forth. And taking seriously the call to prioritize the spirit over the flesh put them at odds with cultures and families and behaviors and so forth that were all around them all the time, so that they stood out sometimes like a sore thumb. Faithfulness will do that to you. It's difficult. Recently, I was contacted by someone who said, I'm a young person, I'm really interested in Orthodox, in becoming Orthodox. And but I was baptized in another church. And my mother says to me that I shouldn't do that because that would be being unfaithful to that baptism. That's a very common thing to experience. I think some of you have experienced that type of experience. And I encouraged the young person, said, please don't fight your mother. Don't bring scandal to your own household. Pray for her. Continue to learn. Because in the end, what you need to reveal to her is not that you are being unfaithful to the baptism with which you were first baptized with, but that you are being faithful to the one in whom you were baptized. That to be fully faithful to Jesus Christ and the Holy Trinity for you now means deepening your faith in a way that you can only find in the Orthodox Church. And that's what God is calling you to. It's not because you hate that church you were baptized in or born in. or that you have some beef with it. By the way, if you came to Orthodoxy because you had beef with your old faith, that's not a good reason to become Orthodox, and your Orthodoxy will not stick. Recently, I shared a wonderful video from, I'm not sure what the name of it is anymore, but I'll have to share it again. A wonderful priest saying, don't come into Orthodoxy because it's not like whatever you like, or because you think it's a corrective or something. Come because you are called to the fullness of faith and you believe that it exists here, and that you feel like you can not do anything less in order to be faithful to Jesus Christ. Because if you're doing it for another reason, it's a polluted reason. It's not going to work out well. And that's part of the hard part here. We're trying to express our faith in Jesus Christ, and a lot of people are asking, why do you got to be Orthodox? Why can't you just be what you were? And if it comes from us to say, it's not you, it's me. I feel like I have to do this to be faithful to Christ. That needs to be where each one of us should expect to experience some blowback from the world if we have decided to pledge our allegiance to Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, especially, but not exclusively, in an Orthodox manner. It may be from friends, from coworkers, from authorities, even from family, and we may feel like we are all alone in that moment, cast out sometimes. Fear not, rejoice, be glad in that day, for great is your reward in heaven. God is faithful, even when others around us are not, even when we ourselves are not. He has set up for us crowns of victory that await us. Let us, therefore, with boldness carry forth, even as we end the Paschal season this week, the words of the Paschal homily of St. John Chrysostom. O hell, where is your victory? Christ is risen. 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 For Christ, being risen from the dead, is become the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. To him be glory and dominion unto the ages of ages. Amen.